My name is Meg Tuohey. Together we'll gather wisdom from a wide range of voices, thought leaders and seekers just like you. Through individual stories, we'll explore multiple categories of wisdom and uncover how the stripes of our experiences, both joyful and challenging and all that lies in between, intertwine to create a rich tapestry of life. So whether you're looking for inspiration, guidance, or simply a moment of reflection, you're in the right place. This is Wisdom Stripes. Today on Wisdom Stripes, we welcome Kelly Monahan, a dedicated researcher and thought leader whose journey reflects a blend of resilience, introspection, and an unwavering pursuit of knowledge. As someone who has navigated life's complexities with both scientific curiosity and a deep commitment to self-discovery, Kelly brings a unique perspective on growth and the human experience. With a background in research and a keen interest in the link between intellectual growth and personal transformation, Kelly's insights remind us that our experiences can be both a study and a practice in resilience. Join us as we explore her story, her reflection on life's trials, and the wisdom she's cultivated along the way. Kelly, welcome to Wisdom Stripes, where we are your fierce fairy godmothers, turning pain and confusion into clarity and confidence. It's so nice to have you in the studio.
Thank you so much, Meg.
We always start with the same question for our guests, and that is, what wisdom would you like a listener to come away with today, and why?
You know, for me, wisdom as a researcher is all about asking a different type of question than we're asking today. So, you know, I'm a researcher in the future of workspace, and I think so often as we think about work today, it's wired towards self-interest and greed. That's not going to lead us to a place of wisdom. As we think about where we are today in a crossroads with AI coming in, we have to ask ourselves better questions, like, what is human work in the age of AI? How do we bring greater dignity to all different types of sectors of work? And as an individual who may be listening today, how do we define success? And I think so often that we've, again, led greed and self-interest, and we've looked and tried to mimic individuals who are powerful. The top 1%, you know, is what we think of as success in the business world. I don't think that's where wisdom would have us ask. Instead, I think it would ask us, how do we protect the human spirit at work? How do we bring a greater sense of shared humanity to the workplace today? So that's what's top of mind for me.
I have so many questions. This is the most magnificent way to start.
Yeah.
So you're a researcher, and your line of research is in the future of work.
Yes.
You're a leader in the field on where you see work progressing.
Yep.
Tell me, where does your data come from? Where do you start with this?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I think there's pre-Kelly of where I was beforehand and where I am today. So from a data perspective, I had this chip on my shoulder that had to be about the numbers. That if we were going to talk to executives and have a place in the room, we had to come with quantitative data. And so I really trained myself of how to put numbers behind people and their emotions. But where I am today as a researcher is much more qualitative, which is, again, as we think about the human experience at work, sometimes it's hard to measure and quantify in numbers. It has to be much more through observation, through listening, through learning, really getting on the front lines alongside of people and understanding their experience. That, I think, is the data that is desperately missing today in many of the future of work conversations.
So I've had the pleasure of seeing you do a keynote speaker situation on Necker Island, where you were brought in as a speaker to speak with the delegate group, of which I was one.
Yep.
And during that time, you talked about the rise and fall of industries and roles that are disappearing and roles that are appearing or expanding.
Yep.
Would you care to share about this and the wisdom behind what that might mean for humanity?
Yeah. So I think, again, in the business world, we so often think of business and even individual growth in terms of linear. Everything's linear. But I think wisdom in reality is everything goes through cycles. We have rise and falls, and we're seeing that today. And this is something that I do think not enough people are paying attention to in the workforce. So one of the things I talked about while we were together on Necker Island is that civilization and power follows these remarkable cycles of about 300 years of where philosophies and power come into dominance. we can say right now, if we look at capitalism in the US, we're at about 275 years of this model. And what I'm fearful of as we again enter into the age of AI, as we begin to see so much mistrust in democracy and in, just basic institutions, that we are at risk of falling and really collapsing what we know to be true today. As a workforce, as across industries, we see this in the labor market imbalance. We have so many people who want to be influencers and even into tech. The reality is that's not going to solve climate crisis. It's not going to solve inequity. It's not going to solve and help us have buildings and structure that's safe for people in homes. And so I think we see this throughout where we are today, that there's so much emphasis on me as an individual and getting myself out there through self-interest and greed, and not enough emphasis of how can I solve my community? How can I use my skills and talent to help meet people where they are today and begin to solve the crisis that's before us?
I feel like we need to talk about the wisdom that lives in the service of community.
Yes.
Let us go there.
Okay.
So I love community. I cultivate communities in the work that I do. And what I've learned from community is that I might be the person who sets the intention or the container.
Yeah.
And also I govern and lead that community. I also have deeply understood over the 6 years of cultivating my community, it's that figure eight. What is that called? The infinity loop, where I give and create safety and structure, but the receiving I get from that experience, the blessings that I get from the community of people.
Yep.
We can't make a community without everybody's contributions.
Yep.
Everybody makes a community. We all have a role to play. And I feel like maybe what you're describing is the wisdom of balancing between giving and receiving.
I love that. And I think where I'm so concerned today, again, as like a workforce researcher, is that our organizations, when you walk into work, are not wired for community. They're actually wired for competition. As we think about the way that we manage performance, it's very much individualistic, and it's a scarcity mindset, not an abundance mindset. If you get this bonus, I have to take it away from someone else, or there's only a limited number of promotions. And so that right off the bat makes us fearful when we walk into organizations and almost have this defensive competitive posture toward our colleagues. And so I think that's what I'm concerned about, is to your point, I think community is the answer to so many of today's problems. As we think about work, remote work, we've never seen the levels of loneliness that we're seeing in the workforce today. And where I'm perplexed, we've never seen such levels of burnout. So we have all this technology, we have all this information, but I think we're actually starving for wisdom in our workforce of how you actually bring that out to, again, bring out the human spirit at work, bring out that community. But to do that means we have to rewire the way we're actually organizing work.
I worked in the corporate space for the first half of my career. So I understand corporates, not for the last 8 years, but for all the other years that I worked before there. And let's not count them. Let's not count. It was a long time. Let's just say that. A long time. Okay. More than 8 years.
You look great.
Sure. I understand, even when I first joined the workforce, where we were still using fax machines.
Yes, okay.
Yes, we were.
Okay.
Yes, and they were coming in.
Yes.
And we used those fax machines in order to make database changes.
Yep.
We were actually using actual databases that you inputted data into.
This would blow Gen Z's mind.
Black screens, green text. Remember those?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So that's where I started. Here's what I remember about that is a very big push in that first decade of my career was about how do we get people to do more? Mm-hmm. And that was something that I was a big part of. I was like, they're only doing this. If we added this, we could save that FTE, that role, and we could just combine it. And maybe a little bit of it is too much and it can go over to that person.
Yep.
And we'll do it like that. And that was a long time ago. That was the early 2000s.
Yep.
And so I just look at where work has gone to.
Yeah.
And we don't have work as just this is your one thing. It's like you don't have one thing. You have all the things. And all of them are important or urgent.
Yep.
And all of them need to happen all the time. And you need to also have work on your phone. Yep. And you also need to do work on all of these hours.
Yep.
And I feel like we have added too much of a burden. And so there's no space for community. Mm-mm. We took away the space of ease at work.
Yes.
And we said, you must perform more, you must perform more, you must perform more. And the people, the good humans, the good people, they tried and they did.
Yep.
And they sold or sacrificed the space of connection and real belonging, which did exist when I first started work.
Yeah.
And I don't think exists in the same way now. Although actually I don't work in a corporate, I run my own company where it does exist. But I think we're pockets, not the majority.
Yeah.
Would that be right based on your data?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Meg. And what we're seeing in our data right now is Gen Z. I have so much hope in Gen Z that they're going to really choose to work differently because, as I think through, I'm an elder millennial, and we still pretty much follow that corporate path. It was very much, this is what we do. And I'll just share a quick personal story of where I kind of woke up a bit and realized something's wrong here. And, I started off my career in HR and I wanted to develop people, at the heart of that's what HR I thought was about, was coming in and engaging the workforce. What I really quickly realized is HR is not there for the people. It's there for the leadership team and business. And it's really kind of served as a protection for that. It is.
Because I also started there.
Did you?
Yes, I did. Continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Oh, no, it's great. And so my very first assignment was actually doing a reduction in workforce. Same thing. So it was robotic process automation that was coming in. It was the exact same calculation. You can install this essential algorithm and go down in headcount.
Yes.
And what I realized is I spent one day, this is when we still did layoffs in person, and spent a 12-hour day doing one-on-ones, letting everyone know they didn't have a job anymore and we were shutting down the office. And I think what haunts me today is people looked at me and said, well, why didn't you prepare us for this? We could have reskilled, we could have done something differently. I've been doing this for the last 20 years. What am I skilled to do today? What am I going to go back into this labor market and actually provide value? And being from Rochester, New York, I saw the same thing happen at Kodak when I was in high school. 45,000 workers lost their jobs over the course of 10 years. And it was so disruptive to family life and that local community. And when I go up and visit friends and family in Rochester, you still see a recessionary environment there. And I don't think corporations realize the destruction we're causing by normalizing these cycles of layoffs and really treating, even calling it human capital as opposed to people and talent. It's doing such a disservice for the way, I think it's spilling over into local communities and the way that we're showing up. And so Gen Z is saying this, to come back to the data, and we're seeing for the first time Gen Z saying, I feel safer about my career choices by going and working for myself, by opting out and abandoning the 9-to-5 career choice, that corporate choice, and really figuring out, how do I create, I call it an island of sanity. How do I create my own island of sanity and work structure that works for me and brings humanity to the forefront? So I'm hopeful we'll see a spike in entrepreneurship in America, at least based on the data I'm seeing from Gen Z.
Yes, we love our new generations coming through.
Yes.
We're appreciative of what they have to teach us.
Yes.
Yes. So I heard a question many paragraphs ago that I held, and I'm going to circle back to it. And it is around the idea of the service-based roles. So in our culture, it has been, as I have grown up, and maybe this is in the data, not just my experience, that the role is to try and get the promotions, try and be able to buy a house and buy a car, and the cost of living, of course, is very much increased over the last 40 years since I was born. And life is not what it used to be. The great Australian dream was you could move to Australia and have a house and land, and that everybody could have that.
Got it.
That is much, much less available in Australia now. It is possible, but it is not what it used to be. And that was what that started in the 50s and the 60s. It has really shifted and changed. And so has the way in which Australia staffs its service-based roles. It relies on immigration to fill those roles. And when we say service-based roles, could you define what that is, just so I know I'm on the same page?
Yeah. So when I think of service-based roles, I mean, again, we use these white collar, blue collar, but really thinking through physical labor, retail, healthcare, government, really those services that we're offering people and providing value, not necessarily producing a product or, and I think through in a, tech side, professional services side, it's really becoming, you're in the front lines and servicing directly the customer, whether in healthcare, government, or manufacturing.
So every time I'm traveling at the moment, I'm in Miami, And I have had the opportunity to engage with so many service-based professions, and they make my experience of life better.
Yes.
It's every time I touch someone, and not literally, metaphorically, and they are kind to me or welcoming to me or warm to me or remember me the next day, I feel at home and I feel at ease. And that sense of belonging, like I'm welcome here.
Yep.
And also I have what I need taken care of. I can make sure I have what I need so that I can be here doing my work, my heart's work. Why don't we value this anymore, Kelly?
You know, it's a question that I have been studying for the last decade because, again, being from Rochester, we had much more service-based jobs. So that's the economy I'm from. That's my friends and family. I had an uncle who worked at Walmart on the front lines. And so I've tried to understand, why is there no dignity in these roles anymore? Why are young people really looking at this in a way that's almost a disgrace if you end up in plumbing, construction as other examples? And I think what's happened is we've prioritized digital product development and convenience really at the expense of what is required to keep a healthy economy moving. And I'm concerned as we think about what our best and brightest talent is doing today is, and you know, I'm an Amazon fan, but we're sending our best and brightest to really drive consumerism and make life more convenient. And if it wasn't at the expense of the other labor market, I would be okay with this. But the problem is it's been at the expense. And our societal narrative has been, get into tech, get into STEM. That's where you're going to make a contribution. And if you actually look, and I get to see a lot of employee data in these industries, these jobs are meaningless for many individuals. And that's why they're getting the salary and compensation that they are, is they don't actually feel like they're having an impact. If you go and you study and you actually look at people who are building roads, who are building homes, there's so much meaning in there because they can see the fruits of their labor. Many tech people can't actually see the fruits of their labor. They're so far removed from the actual outcome that they're trying to solve. And so I think this is on us as consumers, as in society, as you said, as you're traveling, every day we're coming across an essential workers, we learned, as we call them, over COVID, which was also illuminating, teachers. And it's, how do we treat these people? So often I think, you know, I see a janitor in the bathroom and you kind of don't make eye contact or don't acknowledge that person. Every time I go to say hello and thank you so much for what you're doing, you know, and just beginning to acknowledge and see these people, I think gets us one step closer to actually bringing dignity back to these sectors.
I have chills all the way down my body. I'm going to take a minute because I have emotion in my throat about it. Dignity into these sectors. When we get to use a clean restroom, that allows us to restore, reconnect with ourselves, replenish, and then continue on. Why are we not so incredibly grateful for somebody who cared about their work and came to help that space for us?
Yeah, I think we're uncomfortable. I think there's so much inequity that's happening that I think we're uncomfortable with that. We don't know how to acknowledge it. And I think we're in a dangerous place. You know, again, as we think through that cycle, part of like the collapse that happens is we begin to dehumanize individuals and classes and sectors of people too. And I think that's what's happening a bit too. We've seen it in some of the political narrative that's been taking place. We're calling, you know, these jobs, you know, from the highest order of power in the United States, Black people jobs. That's inappropriate and that's wrong. And that's an acceptable narrative that we've began to accept. And so I think we're uncomfortable as individuals of how do you actually handle this reality? And I'd implore people to look at reality. It's so hard and it's painful and it's very uncomfortable, but we have to do that if we're going to bring dignity back to these people.
Okay, let's do two questions.
Okay.
Let's do what is dignity?
Yep.
And let's do what can we do?
Yeah. Love the question because I think we don't talk about dignity a lot at work. To me, dignity is about being valued as a human for just bringing that contribution. We're not going to put judgment on that contribution or how much dollar value that's bringing, but dignity is I see you and I value what that work is that you're doing. I see you and value you. And I think, how do we do that? To your point, I think what you said was so profound before. We need to create space to see people. We need to create slack in the system. We are addicted to busyness and efficiency as companies, as individuals, and it's robbing us of our humanity and our ability to connect deeply with one another. in all of these places. And so I think in order, the most simple thing you can do, slow down. Begin to slow down so that you can see and value what's happening around you.
Really good answers. I am reflecting on my childhood, and not just like young child. I'm reflecting, sort of watching my timeline of American TV shows and sitcoms and movies.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I'm thinking American, because I obviously watched other cultures other than American, but I remember seeing so many storyline arcs about children who were from janitors or from service-based places, and the goal was to not be like that.
Yeah.
Because perhaps of the disrespect, perhaps of the non-appreciation or equity in terms of financial payments, etc. That narrative, I think, has also shaped the way in which people see that kind of work.
Yep.
And I also wonder, and I might be making a stretch or a leap here that doesn't belong, so you have
Sure.
the data, correct me, please. I also wonder if those families put a value on don't do this work. Go do the best grades you can. Be an accountant, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be anything, but don't be this. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's correct, but could you talk to me about, or all of us, about that?
Yeah, I actually do think there's a lot of data to show that's correct. So there's a couple of things that happened, and I'll try to keep this simple, but back in the late 70s, there was a massive shift in how we thought about work. And there was these economists who actually, God bless them, didn't actually do the work. We're sitting in their ivory towers and said, you know what? The moral responsibility of business is to increase shareholder wealth.
It is. That's what it was.
But it wasn't until this happened.
I remember because I think I entered the workforce as that became the thing we talked about.
Yes.
Because that's my early career. That was the new thing that we were all focused on. And I was a small minion in the beginning of that process.
Yes. And that really changed everything. So that a fast follow to that thinking then became trickle-down economics. And so you began to see at the highest level of how we began to organize work in society was really going to be wired to reward individuals that went into these sectors that grew shareholder wealth, and this belief in trickle-down economics. And there was this hope of you're going to continue to climb that corporate ladder and you will become, part of this elite corporate class that was beginning to emerge. And I think what's been startling and where we've gone so wrong is that corporate class didn't used to have a 350-to-1 pay gap ratio between CEOs and the workforce.
Right.
That happened because, again, these were intentional decisions that we made in policy and economic theory that led us to this place. And I think what's so interesting today is here we are, 30, 40 years later, we have gross levels of inequity. We have higher levels of disengagement, even at the C-suite. Our CEOs are sticking around in less time. Their tenure is shortening, which is not good for anyone because there's a lack of stability at leadership levels. And I think what's happened is people got duped. We got fooled into going down this career path thinking this was more stable. This was going to be the safer choice. This was going to allow you to get the bigger house, 2-car garage, not a 1-car garage maybe that the parents had grown up in. And instead, the exact opposite's happening. The safer career path today is going back to the trades. I mean, you're never going to have AI take over plumbing and construction. You're never going to have AI have to worry about job security if you're out building bridges today. But you know what? If you are an accountant, you are a lawyer, even you're a researcher like me, our jobs are being dramatically disrupted. And again, that value of what's left over for the human is still up for debate today, not in the way that we're seeing in the trade. So I don't blame the baby boomers back in the 70s when they were guiding people into these career choices. They were operating with what they knew. It's just we are in a paradox today that the exact opposite is actually playing out.
I'm going to bounce from that wonderfully stated idea to the idea that the millennials were the most educated group out of, I think, maybe the generational data that we have. And I wonder if you could speak to that level of education and what that's meaning in the workforce.
So here's another just alarming fact about the cycles of civilization and power. The other thing that typically marks a decline is the rise of education and intellectualism. And I think you're right. I mean, as an elder millennial, I went and got the highest order of education possible. Love school.
Me too.
Right?
I've been many times.
And again, we were promised, go do this and you will be an expert in your field and you'll have job security. I know a lot of people with a PhD right now who are struggling finding work because of just the imbalanced job markets. And so I think what's happened is I'm still a huge proponent of education. This deep down, I feel like a professor trapped in this corporate body. But the reality is education teaches us how to learn and think critically. And I think what I'm worried about is education became a ticket, almost a shortcut to success and high paying jobs, not the actual practice and art of learning. And what do we need today more than anything?
We need to know how to learn, or how we learn, because all of us learn differently.
Correct.
And so we need to, I see.
And so that's what I'm worried about. If education, again, the value of education, the wisdom of education is in teaching us how to learn. And what I'm concerned about is in the age of AI, being able to detect what is human versus what is not, being able to detect what is truth and, what's, noise and information, that only comes by understanding how to learn and navigate these times. And I think so few people are equipped to actually handle what's going to happen.
Hey there, Meg Tuohey here with a quick and exciting announcement. As a psychologist, coach, and founder of the Wisdom Lab, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of individuals break free from the vicious cycles holding them back and tap into their infinite inner wisdom. If you're tired of feeling unheard, unseen, and stuck in the same old struggles, the Wisdom Lab is the breakthrough you've been yearning for. This on-demand program guides you through a powerful process to shatter emotional barriers, overcome deep-rooted blocks, and experience the profound transformation you deserve. In just 4 hours, you'll gain the tools and insights to revolutionize your life from the inside out. Want to learn more? Click or tap the link in the show notes for all the details. Okay, now back to the episode. Well, let's move there. So I would love to talk about how you know how to discern between what is something that is useful that you see on the internet and actually of service to you and evidence-based or solid, versus something that is generated by somebody who has information but maybe not knowledge or wisdom, or generated by AI. How do you know where to start to build that discernment around what is true and real and what is not?
So I think right off the bat, the one thing that I don't know if people fully understand is all these AI models and large language models that we're building are tuned to be about 80% accurate. And everyone celebrates that as success. So that means about 20% of the time, there's misinformation happening, there's hallucinations, there's, some sort of misinformation. So right off the bat, you have to go in with a skeptical eye of a lot of what's coming out there today is not 100% accurate. And again, as humans, are we 100% accurate? Of course not. Nothing's going to ever be perfect. But the reality is, I think too many people just think, oh, this is AI, this is the greatest technology, this must be true of what it's saying. The reality is it's impossible for that to be true at this time. And so I think from a discernment perspective, as humans, I think this is, again, where I think we're going to get uncomfortable as like educators and scientific principles. We have intuition. And our intuition lets us know when things are coming out that is this bringing joy? Is this meaning? Is this love? Is this bringing peace? Is this harmonizing and bringing community? Or is this creating strife? Is this actually helping my self-interest, that greed, that other side of us that does exist? And I think so often we're ignoring that or not leaning into that intuition as we either see content. How is that making you feel? What sort of reaction are you having to that content? And beginning to lean into a different type of intelligence that is uniquely human, that never is going to go out of style. And I think we've unfortunately, again, scientifically have moved that part of us because we can't explain it. We don't understand it. We can't measure it. But that's exactly the type of intelligence I think we need to be leaning into in order to have discernment today.
It is actually the fundamental reason why I started this podcast.
Okay.
Is we have information, we have knowledge, but the wisdom, the information and the knowledge is AI, and it's perhaps the types of degrees that we get and perhaps the learning that we do, and it's valuable. It's not valuable.
Right.
But wisdom is different to those two things in such deep ways. So there is like that heart-mind coherence.
Yes.
It's one thing. But there's also the ability to reason between ideas and to not say this is black and this is white and my way is white and therefore that is correct.
Yep.
It is to say there's a spectrum, and across the spectrum of black and white lies an infinite variety of shades of grey.
Yeah.
And there is no right way or wrong way. There is only the way that I can find my way through that is in alignment with me.
Yeah.
And I want to go and learn the answers to find my next right thing that moves me towards my goals, which is not my goals in my head,
Yep.
but goals that are aligned to my head and heart,
Yeah.
which is my heart print, which is what I'm supposed to do in terms of my legacy of this one life I get to live.
Yep.
And that humanity
Yes.
we all have.
Yes.
How do we bring that to work?
Oh my God. Now I'm having the reaction. That was beautiful. I think that's exactly what's missing. Because to your point, what's happening is we've never had more information and knowledge, and we've never been sicker as people. Like when we think through our health, number one day for heart attacks, Monday mornings, because of the stress and anxiety of people going into the workplace. So to your point, that alignment, that coherence of both intellect, but also heart, body, soul, and mind, we need to be bringing into the workplace. Now, I do want people to know this was intentionally taken out of the workplace back in the 1920s when Henry Ford, who was, done many great things, but one of the things he failed at was allowing humanity to come to the workplace. He actually said, I'd rather not have people come into the workplace with their heart or emotions that's not for work. I need their hands, and I need them just to work with their hands and not think. And so if you begin to, really fast forward, that philosophy is still woven out through a lot of how we think about work. It's a lot more about conformity, about moving in one direction and not bringing in the emotions, the soul. We never talk about soul at work and what actually makes us human. And so I think one is just beginning to acknowledge that we are human beings. We are not robots. We are not people who are just working with our hands today. It is the whole human needs to show up. But that means we need leaders who can capture that opportunity. Because what I'm fearful of, all this talk right now about bring your whole self to work, we don't have people in power and in leadership who can handle and manage that. And that actually can become a form of manipulation or toxicity for people who are genuine and trying to bring their whole selves to work. But it's really not accepted. So one, we have to acknowledge, again, the reality of what we're working in and desperately train our leaders to accept and be able to handle full humanity at work.
That is, though, an ask of our leaders to grow in their wisdom.
Yes.
And their emotional intelligence and their ability to know how to support individuals as a whole person, not a set of hands. Yes. And of course, we are the humans. There is a lot of suffering in the world. And the workplace is a system that we belong to.
Yep.
And it used to, I think, maybe not in the 1920s, but it used to be a system where we did find more satisfaction and belonging and a sense of pride, and it had better boundaries, and we had better quality of life outside of work often.
Yes.
Not for everybody, sure. I understand. What I feel like what we're really talking about is the call to grow as humans, to evolve in that heart-mind coherence with that emotional intelligence, to be able to serve the individuals and also have a lovely performance culture, because doing the work and doing the work well is also really important.
Yes.
We can't have it just the way where we're only looking after the employees who have pain and heartache.
Right.
We actually need them. All of us, we have all got pain and heartache.
Yeah.
We all still need to contribute, because that is the way the world works. And that is not currently in balance, I don't think.
I don't think it is. And it's funny, one of the questions I ask when I give seminars or bring the research to leaders, I can usually predict how in balance they are and their team is by asking, do you think people inherently want to work? Because if the answer is no to that, we're not going to spend a lot of time trying to create conditions and bring meaning to that role or job if we don't think people want to be there anyways. And the second question I ask that usually predicts whether or not, again, there's this coherence is whether or not they trust their workforce to do what's right on behalf of the organization. To your point, do people actually want to contribute and find satisfaction and meaning just by the art of contribution? And most leaders answer no to those two questions.
Ouch.
And that is, I think, so much of where the root problems stem today is we've got leadership who, again, in our MBA courses, we've taught people are inherently lazy. They don't want to work. They don't want to make contributions. That's, again, all of these hidden philosophies are what we're teaching managers and leaders. They don't take psychology. They don't take any. I mean, is there even education on wisdom in the business school? I think it would probably be laughed out. And I think that's actually what's harming us today. And I think that's why I'm so thankful for you, this podcast of how do we actually bring wisdom and really, to your point, the full humanity back to the workplace. Because I think leaders would be shocked at how well people are productive, how well they innovate, how efficient they can be when given the right circumstances and trust to do so.
Do you want to know like a little secret?
Yes.
It's not even a secret. In my career before I started my company, so up until 2018, I did a stint of work as a consultant.
Okay.
And I went into organizational leadership teams and I taught organizational development ideas, you know, like sometimes talent management, sometimes having difficult conversations, those kinds of things.
Yep.
Yes. And I took some of my therapy ideas in. And I took the relationship ideas in and I started to sprinkle them. And when I started to teach the intricacies of relationships, the wisdom of relationships, the malnourishment of not understanding was vivid. And I remember going back to the company founders and saying, I think there's something here. I think we should do more of this. And they said, there's no market for that. And I said, I am in these spaces and they are ravenous for this.
Yes.
And they said, there's no interest. We won't be able to do that. We won't be able to sell that. And I said, okay. And so I ended up doing a version of that myself, as we know.
Yes.
But when I was there long enough that I went into some organizations more than twice. And over the period of that time, say right at the beginning and right at the end, I watched them go out having a change with me and then understanding and realizing who they are and what they could give and how to be with their teams.
Yep.
And then they would come back 6 months, 12 months later, and I would do the next round.
Yeah.
It was almost like being back at zero.
Oh,
and
no.
I realized the system that they were in was not growing. And so feeding the C-suite or feeding the next layer down was also not really, even though you think, surely you can change that system. That system is bigger than these groups of people.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the reasons I decided to leave teaching in the corporate space was I need like the top people.
Right.
Because they're the ones that say, hang on, this is not how we do it.
Yep.
And they are the ones that hold the cultural tone. So I ended up taking that into the work that I do now and working with women who are the cultural tone setters of the home.
Yes.
Who can then change the system. Because I want to change systems.
Yes.
So for people who are listening to this, who are like, I can't change this system. Kelly, where do we start to bring wisdom and humanity and more of ourselves when the system is not designed for that?
Yes. It's a brilliant question. And I'll tell you how I address this because I love your story right there. And I relate to it in so many different ways because the system is flawed and it's wired to protect itself at the very top. And so it's really hard, to your point, to get the people at the top to empathize and bring humanity to it. There's no reason for them to do so in our current structure. So today what I do is, this term I got from an author and researcher named Meg Wheatley, and she said, we have to continue to believe in the inherent goodness of people to be kind, to be creative, to bring joy, and people want to contribute. And I can't do that at a system level anymore because I'm exactly where you are right now in my own journey of I'm spending a lot of time to the wrong audience. And so the right audience is your listeners. And it's how do you continue to believe, have that unwavering faith that at the individual level, when you're in the trenches with your colleagues, people can contribute. They'll work overtime and help problem solve. You've seen it. We all know that to be true. And so you have to believe also deeply that it's the local small changes that over time begin to create the bigger impact.
Small things often.
Small things often. And I desperately believe in the physics and science behind the butterfly effect. And by doing these small things, we don't know what sort of change we could be creating, these little sparks. And I think we can't lose faith and sight in these sparks and keeping focus on our local communities. That's where it has to start. If we're not doing this at an individual level, it's never going to change.
So one of the things I think we need to talk about is noticing and appreciating.
Yeah.
We need to be externally noticing. Thank you so much. I see the work that you did. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for noticing that this team member or this person needed help and stepping in. We need to be much more openly noticing and appreciating out loud every day. That is how we start to build a system of connection. Yep. And really what we're talking about is reconnecting people to the inherent good feelings of contribution in society and in work. Because Freud says, and Freud is problematic in some ways, but one of the things he said that I have never forgotten is success in life is being able to love and work.
Oh, love that.
Me too. And work is contribution. It is about what you gather and how you serve and what you learn and what you make. Yep. And it is not inherently tied to financial outcomes. So you don't need a job to work. Yep. Work is actually your contribution to your family, your contribution to your community, your contribution to your loved ones. When we are contributing, we are happier, we are satisfied, we are contented, we feel valuable. Yeah. And that is what we have lost sight of. Yep. And also when we love well, when we notice and appreciate, when we can give and receive, and when we are able to be in harmony in that figure eight between those two things, and we grow that over time, that is the journey, that's the essence of life.
I love it.
Me too.
That's it. That's it.
I have a question for you. As we start to get towards the end of today's session, we're going to metaphorically move into fall, and we're not in Florida. Okay. So it's like a temperature change. It's like a crispness in the air. Maybe we're in the Midwest somewhere. Okay. The leaves are they're turning. Yeah. Not the Florida ones. They're not turning. I don't think.
No, they don't turn down here.
So we're somewhere where the leaves are turning. And there is like warmish days and coolish nights. Okay. And we're on a big porch. Big front porch. It's you and me. We've got all the types of drinks that we like. Yep. Lots of them. Got good snacks. You're in your comfy cozies. I'm in my comfy cozies. And we have space at the table for our listeners to join us. Yeah. And we're all gathering and we're friends and we're happy to see each other. Yeah. And there's going to be a chance for you to share one thing with them. One last parting, loving, connected, kind gift. What is it that you want to leave our listeners with?
I would say, and I'm speaking to myself, to my own lived experience, be careful of consumerism on this journey. That ends up blinding us to others. And I think that's something that we don't connect often back to work, and why we kind of get caught in this hamster wheel and all this striving is because we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're trying to get the next bigger, best thing. I mean, Apple, for right or wrong, has taught us that you need a new phone every year, whether or not that's true or not, because there's a better model. Be careful as you're thinking about success, that it's not just what you consume, but it's what you contribute back to others. And if we had more people defining and feeling their success by their contribution as opposed to their consumption, I think we'd have much better workplaces and societies.
I think you're right.
And it's tough. It's, I have to watch myself on this all the time.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Yeah, maybe all of us do. Yeah. Why do those bright, shiny objects hold such interest for us?
Well, oftentimes I think because we're social beings that we're always we really don't see ourselves as just ourselves in isolation. It's always in comparison or in contrast to others. And I think consumerism is on full display today. I mean, through digital environments, and it's manufactured and not real in a lot of ways as well. We're just seeing snippets of other people's lives and what they have. And I think oftentimes we compare ourselves and we become easily dissatisfied. I had a friend recently who stopped looking at reels and these short videos because she's like, I'm so dissatisfied. Like, I thought I was successful and I thought I had enough, but I didn't take this vacation. I'm not driving this type of car. I don't live in this type of neighborhood. And we're exposed to so much of that. And so I think today the best thing that we can do is really, again, separate ourselves from that comparison and contrast and figure out what is your definition of success? What is going to make you satisfied? And as we discussed today, that universal truth is we can all get back to that contribution of what is your skill set? Who needs you? How can you serve? And that is the dialogue. And I wish we were sharing videos of that. And actually that was becoming amplified of the contributions we were making and the communities we were serving, as opposed to the latest purchases that we have.
Imagine if we could create a culture where you could show how you contribute.
Yes.
And we all were like, high five to you. I love seeing your contributions. I love that part that you have in yourself, which is just yours.
Yep.
Yeah, how about that?
That's what we need a space for in a community of.
I agree wholeheartedly. So I feel like this is the nice natural end of our podcast, but I have a little gift for you.
Oh,
it's been hiding down here.
I got another. I'm so excited.
There's another little gift and it's in my hand. Now, at this live event that I just finished in Kansas City, which is why I'm in Miami, and thank you for flying in to meet with me. That was, and us.
Yes.
Sorry, everybody. Us. I did an activity with my women, and we did a thing where we wrote a letter of the pain, and then we covered it in love, and we went through a ritual releasing ceremony of great support, a great container of love and support. And women then took a stone, a tumble stone, as a reminder of the gift of the wisdom that came from the painful event. Because from every piece of pain actually comes the impetus to grow, to quest, to answer questions, to figure things out. And there's gratitude available for what had to come from potentially quite tragic circumstances. There's always a pathway out that we would have not found if it wasn't for the pain. And that's not to make the pain not appropriate.
Totally.
It's not. However, we're human and we've got these contexts. So how do we find something worthwhile? And so what I have for you here is your very own tree jasper tumble stone. And this tree jasper tumble stone is in honor of your wisdom that you shared with us, that you have worked across your life to gather and formulate and to share back on this podcast, so that you never forget the pain that caused you to go and answer the questions that we got to benefit from today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
tree
Meg.
wisdom.
Oh, I absolutely love it and will cherish it. And it's sitting right on my desk. So I will look at this every day.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. What a joy it has been to share this time with you.
Thank you, Meg.
Yes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Wisdom Stripes. Follow me on @MegTuoheyOfficial and leave a comment and review. I'm looking forward to meeting you here next time on Wisdom Stripes.